Hello and welcome to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Chris and welcome to the round 8 to round 9 T-Pod. Team Pod. Had a pretty decent week this week. I will go through everything, but thank you very much for tuning in. Shout out to our sponsors, of course, at Splash Vodka. If you do want to check us out on all of our major podcast platforms, you are more than welcome to. We are available on Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, you name it, we're on it. Supercoach, obviously, on YouTube, on Supercoach Insider, obviously. And, of course, TikTok, you'll see our... invariably, Ben jumps on from time to time and drops like 20 TikToks. So if you do see us on there, shout us out, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a comment. And we just recorded our a 2.5 hour podcast this week, which covers a lot of information. So I probably won't go too in depth this week, but let's go through what happened, what my score was. So I scored 2,487 this week. Good score without being a great score. I saw a lot of 2,500s and I was pretty disappointed. I probably deserved to be in that 2,500 category if it wasn't for a little guy I like to call Luke Davies Uniacke. Absolutely tanking my score in the last round. But yeah, we're not happy with that. I did, however, rise in ranks considerably. I went up 920 places, so I'm now ranked 1,105. So just outside the top 1,000, hoping that next week I can bridge that gap. But it looks like I went all right. So where did I go well this week? What were the changes? So I ended up bringing in Sinclair, so he instead of Steele, so I went with the defender option, which means that my defense is now completely filled. I've got Will D playing in the midfield this last week, mainly for loophole purposes, but that switcheroo and switching ability makes it a little bit easier. Obviously, I took the Sincotta 70 that happened early on that Friday night. I took the VC Dunkley, so that was a little bit different from, again, so I do apologize for those. This was a bit of a last-minute decision. I got nervous feet with Stewart, moved on to Dawson. I was going to go VC Dawson, and then last minute I was probably about an hour, maybe an hour and a half before kickoff. I looked into some statistics on Cripps and how he's been played against taller mids, and he's been getting dominated. So his defensive ability has just actually gone through the floor, and he's just letting scores go through. So it seems like the Cripps match up for Carlton. They look to use Cripps offensively, not necessarily defensively, and that just leaves his opponent to do whatever he wants. And Dunkley was literally doing whatever he wants, but also playing him very accountable inside and basically dominated Cripps. Probably the best game I've seen Dunkley play in a long, long time. Probably deserved a lot more than 149. If he got a goal or two with that, he would have been easily 200. His efficiency was down a little bit, which is annoying, but he just played so well. He was getting intercept possessions and intercept marks. He was using the ball forward. He was outbodying him at the contest, getting lots of contested disposals as well. He was just everywhere, Dunkley. So, yeah, really happy with that VC, even though, probably one of the VCs in the round, to be fair, but could have even been higher. So we'll see. My progression now, I think I'm averaging like 145 in terms of captain options now. So still really, really high. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I can keep that going. So going from the back, obviously Dawson was very good. He actually started on fire and then sort of trailed as the game went on. Dacos, the reason why I called on the VC Stewart was that my captain option was looking at late Dacos, and I got really called on that with Ryan Clark as well. So didn't really want to leave myself. I always wanted Bont in the fixtures, which he obviously read very, very well. So if I wasn't going Stewart, who was I going? Was I going Dawson? Could have gone to Bont with that, maybe. Did I want to go VC Bont potentially? And then I've settled on I obviously wouldn't have had Clary. So yeah, didn't get Bont in as that option. Sinclair went 99, but played mostly midfield, which is very unique. So we'll watch that and monitor that as the weeks go on. I was expecting him to increase his average and roll be more behind the ball. Didn't happen. Obviously, Zebra 179. This is not something you can bank on every week. This is ridiculous the way that North played football this week. They basically just played chip to chip in the back. It was the most boring game of football I've ever seen. Merritt's 106 was actually unders. Finished the game on 114. Was scaled back 8 points. Ridiculous. Couldn't believe that happened. But played very, very well. His efficiency was down, unfortunately. So there was times where he just made the wrong decision or tried the handballs that weren't necessarily there, but was everywhere, was easily there. In my opinion, Essendon's best player on the ground. Bond obviously huge. Tom Green had 38 disposals, I want to say, and 3 goals, and somehow only got 135. LDU is just... when this first happened, I was raging at like 3/4 time, when I think it was like 38 or something stupid. So his 59 was a salvageable score considering what he was on. And I had a look at the stats after the game. After the game, I wanted to rage trade him straight away. I was like, no, I'm flipping him right now to Brayshaw. And then I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I looked at the game and the way it was played. Not a lot of ruck contests and not a lot of stoppages, which is obviously his strength. And the AFL average is around 90 stoppages per game. And they had 60. So that's incredibly low for a single game of football, which meant there's not a lot of the mids. So you've obviously, as you know up here, Sinclair only got 99 playing mainly in midfield. Steele only got 95. Like no mids scored well in this game. So that was it. Will Day 84 again started with like a house on fire and then trailed, so wasn't happy with that, but it is what it is. I'm happy with him as D6, to be completely honest. He plays really, really well. He's going to get some spike games. He's going to get some 110, 120s, and I'm completely okay with that. Hopper 111, excellent. Ashcroft, again, initial reactions to trade. I'm rethinking that. I'll go through my trade options very shortly. Jimby came in and he matched his break-even. So his break-even's pretty similar this week. So again, happy to keep him, happy to trade him. Either way. Wilmot's kind of reset his break-even a little bit. He's got a little bit of money to make because I think it's down now to 37. Gorn, huge. 130, beat English in terms of scoring. I think we're going to see these games. We're also going to see 80s and 90s and things like that. So don't anticipate Gorn to average your 130-ish or 120-ish, but somewhere around 110 I think is very, very achievable. Definitely good as a forward option because, again, he played about 40% forward this week, meaning that he's very, very, very likely to get forward ruck DPP. I think that probably puts him up towards a 38% mark in terms of overall for the year. So one, if you need to make a trade this week, you absolutely can jump on Gorn and then have him as your F6. Taranto was good but not great, which was good for me because a lot of people VC'd him. Obviously, we talked about Dunkley. Rosie was terrible early and came in late. Maybe that's potentially because Butters got injured and he was more relied on in the last quarter. But he did pick it up in quarter 2 and 3, so it's not just solely the last quarter. But scraping together a 104 was pretty impressive when I think he was on like 20 or maybe even less at quarter time. Goulden, insane, but don't expect this moving forward. Had 0% CBAs this week. Was basically a winger / halfback, and they played chip to chip, just like how Zeeble played it, exactly like how Goulden played it. They sort of just went like triangle, all the way up the wing, and always used Goulden's wing for some reason. Obviously because of his foot use, but it just didn't work and didn't win them the game. So I can't imagine it being a successful tactic moving forward. Obviously, we're always holding Sheasel, but it's nice for him to reset his break even, which I will have a look at now. So his break even's back down to 39, so he's actually going back up in price. Could be 500, and then who knows what happens from there. Chandler 57, but has some decent fixtures coming up. So you're probably not trading Chandler this week. I think they play Hawks, Port, Freo next 3. So you could potentially hold him 3, or I'm at least holding him 1, giving him another chance. If he pumps out a 50 this week, then I'm probably trading him next week. But if he pumps out 80, 90, or whatever, resets his break even back down to a way that he can get to 400k, then you probably hold on to him until the end of that Freo game. Van Ruen's got to go. So that's the first thing. Fan Ruin, obviously 247k. Scored a 48, so it kind of salvaged the score because he was on a lot lower than that earlier in the game. But came back late. They do have Hawks, obviously, and important Freo because he's running on that same schedule. But he's going to miss the next 2 weeks now with a suspension. I doubt he gets off. I can't imagine that. Does come back for Freo, but are you really going to want to hold him just for that Freo game? That Freo defenders are actually pretty good. Like, I'm not sure. I don't think you do. I think it's time to trade. His break even's 59, so even that game that he comes back is going to make you money. Probably not. It's a trade out for me. And then Davey with a 31. Really disappointing because at halftime he was on 29. So he scored 2 points and a half. What do I do with Davey? It's kind of that guy that I'm just waiting for they got made $100. I'm kind of just waiting for a points a spike, and I thought we would get it. I thought at halftime I was like, he's got a potential to go like 60 to 70 here, and no. So Brisbane this week, then Richmond, then West Coast. So really, if I'm holding him this week, you got to hold him to West Coast. And that's kind of where, West Coast North, it opens up 11-12. So right before their bye, generates a bit of cash. So I think I kind of have to hold him. He's also handy because he's mid-forward. And, Roberts obviously is out, for the considerable term. So you can kind of flick them between each other at this stage to do loopholes. The caveat to that is Davey obviously playing games. So if Davey gets dropped again this week or becomes a sub, then he's kind of not a must trade out, but is one that you have to evaluate on. I don't think his break even's too bad this week. Yeah, 45. So I'm probably holding, but I can see myself trading soon. And if I had a reason to trade him, or I could get to a premium with the money that he presented, I'd probably look at him. But I can't because I did have a look at that earlier, and I'm about 10k short of doing what I want to do with the money that I have in bank. So JVR is definitely gone, and I've got a couple of options here. So let's go with the trade out Ashcroft option that I'm looking at. So the first one's Ashcroft, of course. Ashcroft himself obviously scored a 37, tanked his cash gem, which is annoying because he scored 105 the week before or whatever it may be. Because of that 100 in his cycle, it means that he hasn't dropped cash yet. And next week his BE is only in the 70s, I want to say. So you could potentially hold Ashcroft and then, play him on field. Brisbane have let's bring up their run here. So they're 37, BE of 71. So yeah, he's obviously got, he's got a 53% chance of hitting that. Pretty strong. Brisbane have Essendon this week, who leaked midpoints, then Gold Coast, then Adelaide. So you could potentially hold him to his bye. At the end of Adelaide, you kind of got to get rid of him, or I'm not sure what you do. If you hold him past his bye, then he's got Hawks the first week, then Sydney, then St Kilda. Not great, but you could potentially do that. I'm not against holding Ashcroft, but this is an opportunity where the next 3 weeks he probably doesn't make much cash, if at all. So there's definitely an opportunity to trade him if you want to trade him, because he doesn't make much cash over the next 3 weeks anyway. So yes, he's a potential trade out. He's also a potential hold. It really just depends on what's better for your team. For me, I'm just seeing what comes. Right now, I'm looking at, if I was to do this method, I would bring in. So I'm just moving Mitchell forward because he would be on my forward bench, and then I'm bringing in a defender and a mid. If you want to go into why I feel like Weddle is the best downgrade target, go through our pod that we just released. I'm not going to go too much into this, but I do believe that for my team, Weddle is the best, and again, for my specific team. And part of that is the reason that he's just coming in a D8, so why do I care? He's just there to be a warm body who makes some slow burn cash. So for me, that's fine with me. And then it gives me obviously 660. Who am I going to go get for that? Well, the clear and obvious option is obviously Clayton Oliver, who I don't have. So that's the first option. So leaves me with about $8,000. Again, clears my bank, but I get Clayton. He's obviously bottomed out. that's that's one of the likely scenarios that I look at. And then Crazy Chris comes to play and goes, no, I don't want to do that. So let's say I didn't want to trade. So let's say I want to keep Ashcroft. I want to keep Ashcroft because of cash gen purposes. I want to field him. And so therefore, he's going to have more points on field. So keeping Ashcroft over, say, a Jinby on field, who's the other one that I'm looking at trading out, I would say that's probably a 20 to 30 point swing in terms of positive to keep Ashcroft. So anyone that I'm trading in for this week only needs to score 20 to 30 points less than Clayton Oliver for that to be points profitable. It's not to say it might not be cash profitable because Clayton Oliver has a fairly low break even. I think it's about 103. So you'd anticipate against Hawthorn, he probably goes 120, 130. I do think Nash comes and tags Oliver. I'm not sure how much that impacts him though. So that's a consideration. So if I went with Jinby out instead, and I went Jinby and Van Ruin out and Weddle in, I mean, the other options I could obviously go Wilmot out and keep Jinby. But I kind of feel like at the moment, with Wilmot has an opportunity for a spike score with no Rich, no Coleman this week now. Does it go behind the ball? Does it get kick outs? Does it change the way that he's able to score? I think it potentially does. And so I kind of want to keep Wilmot because I think he's got a higher potential for a spike score. If I'm looking at trading out Jinby for, again, this is a this week only play. What I said last week is still true. He's really struggling in terms of being able to score because of the way that he scores. But he's not really available on the spread. He's just only an inside and stoppage player. So therefore, you're really capped. But keeping Jinby, Gold Coast and Hawthorn next 2 weeks. This week, obviously, at Optus, and then next week at in Tassie against the Hawks. Following week against Essendon. Like that's 3 pretty good matchups that you could justify keeping Jinby over Wilmot. That's potential. So that might be something that I look at over the next week. But playing the break even point of thing, Wilmot has a much lower break even. So if he does spike a score, he's going to go up a lot more in terms of cash. And his break even is break even. Here we go, 37. So if he gets a 70 score or something similar, he's going up 15k, resetting his break even to a little bit lower. And then we're talking about, why didn't we hold Wilmot instead? Whereas Jinby has a 61. If he goes 70, slight increase in cash. So the game is about cash gen. It is about points, of course, as well. Who scores more? Who makes more cash? I'm not sure. At the moment, I think that Jinby's the right play. And it also allows me to loop someone like a Wilmot. So we'll see. Now, that leaves us in terms of cash available to spend, 570. Now, the one that I'm heavily leaning towards is Callum Mills. So there's others out there that I know. Last week I was saying, look, Steele is the one. I do still think that Steele's a good option. But Mills at that price, I'm not sure you can go past him. Let's bring up Steele first. I'll go through Steele first and why is a good pick and why is a bad pick. So first of all, his fixture run. So if you look at Steele from here, it's insane. Now, this week's not the best game. They have Adelaide, who's obviously been pretty good this year. But then they have GWS, Hawthorn, Sydney, Richmond, all great for mids. Brisbane, great for mids. West Coast, great for mids. So he goes on this 6-week run of awesome mid games. And then Melbourne, which is hard. But then Gold Coast, North, Hawthorn, Carlton again, who's all of a sudden Carlton leaking points. Richmond. So another 5 really good games there. And then finishes Geelong hard and Brisbane easy. So they have, of the remaining games, what I would call 3 hard games, 1 next week, and then the rest of them are pretty easy. So I think Jack Steele's are valuable in even with his injury, because I think he gets better as the season progresses. The one thing that I did like about Steele last week and the week before is that even with his shoulder or collarbone issues, he still is averaging 9 tackles over those games. So he had 11 the first week and 7 in week 2. So Last week's score wasn't really conducive to mid-scoring. I think he goes up. Now, the one consideration, obviously, is break-even play. So what's he sitting at for break-even? 75. So my theory is this week I want to kind of bring in guys that are going to... this is going to be tough. I want a guy this week that's going to be an absolute mammoth scorer. What does he go against Adelaide? 110? Maybe? Look at his previous history versus Adelaide. So can't count COVID year, but he had a 126 last year. He probably goes head-to-head with Dawson this year. Is that a good or a bad thing? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. 140 versus GWS last year. You'd say he goes head-to-head with Tom Green next week. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's going to be good either way. I think Jack Steele's a fine pick. Do I want another week extra of data with his break-even? Maybe. But I do like Callum Mills. So Callum Mills right now is a weird pick for some, but he's a great pick for me. So I'm looking at Callum Mills and going, okay, he's had an uptick in his CBAs. It's on the back of having defenders come back to the party. So instead of playing in defence like he has been and being thrown around all over the place, he was thrown back into the midfield. Yes, it was a bit all over the shop in terms of his possessions, a lot behind the ball, etc. That's just the way that they were playing. Is that a reflection on how I see him? He had 31 disposals and 9 marks for only 100 with a negative kick-handball ratio, which is unlike Mills as well. It's a bit of a flyer, but the thing is that fixture is amazing as well, and they have Freo this week. Freo give up bulk points to midfielders. Absolute bulk points. All of the really big midfielders all have that. And the next 3 weeks is just a bunny run. Freo, North, Carlton, unbelievable next 3 weeks for a midfielder. Obviously, they have St Kilda and then Brisbane, West Coast, 2 really good mid ones. Then Geelong, then Richmond. So a bit of a ticky-tat. Freo again, which is amazing. And then Essendon, mid-points. GWS, mid-points. Gold Coast are iffy. And then Adelaide and Melbourne to finish the season. So I genuinely think Mills could go back to that sort of... I know the first part of the year last year, I think till the bye, he averaged like 124. I think he can't... I'm not saying he's going to average 124, but I think 115, 120 is something that he can do. So I want to try and get him in. Now, the thing in with Mills is, again, break-even's 116. So you probably can afford to wait on him a week. But I've just got this feeling that he just goes absolutely 150 plus this week against Freo. And if that's the case, and he gets one of his... And we've seen Callum Mills with a ceiling of 200 before. So do you really want to do that? Or do you want to get in Steele with a lower break-even and play those break-even games, maybe getting Mills later? Or do you want to risk it? I don't know what the answer is. But I like Mills. I do. And it's left field. And this is just what Chris does, is that it gets to this stage of the season. I want to try and make up points. I start bringing in guys like Mills that could make or break my season. And that's honestly what that is. It is a make or break pick where I could gain huge points in the next 3 weeks from having Mills. Or I can drop points by having Mills and drop places by having Mills. Steele's a pick that's going to go serviceable next week, but I could probably wait a week on that. And the other thing with Clary, so let's say I bring in Clary, which is a serviceable pick. I do kind of want him next week because he plays Freo next week. So getting in Mills this week against Freo and then getting in Clary against Freo, I kind of feel like is the right move. Leaving 50k in my kitty for this week. Leaving Ashcroft gives me a plus 20 point barrier this week and a little bit of a hole. And then I can trade out Ashcroft and with the 50k I've got. So if I want to get to Clary next week, let's say I need 660k because he goes above his break even, which is 100. So let's say Ashcroft goes 80. He probably goes to 380k. I've got 50k in there, so it's 430k. Let's say 425k. I need to make up 240k. So the only way I can do that is Chandler. So if Chandler has a stinker, then I can trade out Chandler and Ashcroft next week to Clary, which I think's a completely fine move. Chandler to Drury, Ashcroft to Clary. I think that works. So this week, how am I lining up? So I'm probably lining up a little bit like this. Sincotta, I don't know why I did that, will be in the midfield. I think after Permit put him in, captain's going to be on Bont, absolutely guaranteed. VC is throwing up right now. Stewart's a serviceable option on the Friday night. I think he could go huge. Richmond love to leak points against halfbacks. I can see that going quite well. They love to just hack it forward. Also, Mills versus Freo. So those are the two VCs that I'm throwing up in this sort of situation. Yeah. I've also, there's a way that obviously I can get, say, Mitchell into the back line here and have him as the E if I don't want Weddle. I can switch that around. There's no harm in that. Roberts, basically what that means is, I E on Davey instead of Mitchell, and then move Roberts forward and then move Mitchell back. I can do that through DPP. That's completely fine. So there we go, guys. You can see my projected score is 25-33 for the week with these changes. Which is pretty good. I think that with Clary, it was a little bit higher, maybe 10 points higher. But I don't necessarily think that reflects what the true nature of this week is going to bring. So we'll see how it happens. I do believe that holding Ashcroft for that 1 week versus Jinby is going to be a determining factor, because even if Mills goes 110 and Ashcroft goes 80 and Jinby goes 60, then it's like having a Clary 130 anyway. So the benefits do outweigh that. Moving forward, I've still got Ashcroft, I've got Sincotta, and I've got Chandler. As I said, likely going say Drury in, and then Ashcroft up, leaving me with say Drury and Sincotta as my last two upgrades. Obviously outside of Hopper, who's due later in the piece. He probably won't be traded until his buy. I think he's probably a late buy flip. But then, with Drury in, I can probably move Roberts forward and then loop Mitchell and Drury. I've got those options there. Sincotta, I can still loop with Wilmot. I've got him there. And then Day, I can always... Weddle obviously is just really back up for the premiums because they're already there. So looping those two midfield options. Johnson comes back next week, so that'll hopefully comes back in the senior team, of course. So I should be right for rookies in terms of being able to do them. Holding Wilmot, I'm hoping that he makes 15, 20, maybe even 30k more over the next couple of weeks. But he will get me to his buy, hopefully, and then I can flip him then and use his cash gen. But overall, I think the team's in pretty good shape. I'm not upset with it. We'll see how we go. Next week, as I said, Drury is the likely candidate, but we'll see. And the week after that, got to look towards getting rid of, say, Davey and Mitchell, etc. And trying maybe even a double down 1 week or similar, so that I can start getting the cash out of these guys to upgrade to those last couple of positions. Because like everybody else, at that point, I'm probably going to be struggling for cash leading into the buys. So yeah, thanks guys. Hope you enjoyed. I look forward to seeing you guys on the other pod as well. That is probably going to drop after this, but if you have any questions, just give us a holler in the comments, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.